Right now, over 1 billion people globally are obese. But by 2050, it's estimated that 1/3 of the world's population will be. Even though life expectancy is increasing around the globe, the rise in obesity and lifestyle disease means that many aren't living longer, they're just staying alive for longer. So, why do we have an ongoing global health crisis? Is it the processed food, lack of physical activity, or perhaps we've just let ourselves go without consequence due to the ever-improving medical field? Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. So in order to fully understand it, we have to rewind back into the early 1800s. You see, back in the day, only two types of people really got fat. Rich people who had access to buying tons of food, and farmers who produced the food. Back then, having some extra weight was actually seen as a status symbol displaying wealth and survivability, and was also seen as more attractive. If you had lots of food, then you were more desirable because you could feed your family. And remember, only 200 years ago, starvation was a fairly normal cause of death. In fact, the world-famous potato famine of Ireland happened in the mid-1800s, and nearing the end of that century, this man was renowned as the fattest man on earth, and was considered so comically large that his main source of income was being displayed at a circus. Access to food back then was a problem, but people were still able to put on weight if they consumed it in excess. Then we went through the Industrial Revolution, which optimized a lot of practices, including farming. Now, food didn't become more plentiful overnight, but through the 1800s and early 1900s, food production skyrocketed, and machines helped simplify the process. Now, we did go through 2 world wars, which did cause some food scarcity, so it wasn't until after those that we started to see mass production of food across the Western world. Suddenly, food became more accessible, cheaper to produce. Though we didn't yet have the full fast food industry and mass production of ultra-processed foods like we have today, it was starting to show that the generation who grew up after the Second World War were, let's say, enjoying themselves a bit more than earlier generations. Then we saw the rise in large food companies. Because most people were now living relatively normal lives, they had homes, stable jobs, and just wanted to live their best lives. Therefore, food started modernizing into a different focus. Before, people would enjoy a meal at home with their family, cook from scratch, and in many places they still do. But during the mid-1900s, the market changed. Now, food became more about taste and convenience rather than a necessity. The McDonald brothers opened up their first location in 1955, and Burger King opened up 1 year before that. Quick and easy food that you can just get on the go. A revolutionary new way to consume food without spending so much time waiting. Time spent better elsewhere. Not in the gym though, they hadn't seen this guy yet. But from then, obesity would start to balloon out of proportion. Many see the 1980s as the turning point, as that's the same time when fast food blew up, processed foods became the norm, mass production with the prime focus being taste, price, and convenience over solid ingredients. We even had that low-fat craze in the 1970s, which instead drove up the consumption of simple sugars because everyone demonized fat. At the same time, jobs became more sedentary. Less people would choose a physically demanding line of work because they didn't have to. If you could make the same amount of money as somebody who moves heavy stuff around, gets sweaty and dirty all day by typing stuff on your computer, sitting in meetings, drinking coffee, and sorting papers, most people would opt for the second option. And when work and family life takes over, many simply didn't find the time or resources to train or even go for a walk, a hike, or anything else to improve their cardiovascular health. Now, fast forward to the 2020s. Now the Western world isn't alone. Countries like India, Brazil, most of the Middle East, and even China are starting to succumb to the obesity crisis. With average BMI rates going up every year, especially amongst children who are the best predictor of adult obesity rates, because as you're young, you are able to produce more fat cells, drive higher hunger signaling, and you make a lot of habits which stick for your life, some of which are very difficult to overcome. On top of this, the food industry is driven by profit margins, and the more food you're able to produce, the better. We use synthetic ingredients, simple sugars, saturated fats, and push the human taste buds to the absolute limit in order to sell more products. The fast food industry is so widespread that you can't even walk down a single street without seeing a McDonald's or Wendy's or shady knockoff. In most grocery stores, a muffin costs as much as an apple, cucumber costs the same as a bag of chips, and lean meats like steak or chicken are the most expensive foods you'll find, while you could probably buy 3 frozen pizzas for the price of 1 steak. And we know that consuming more processed foods is linked to higher rates of obesity and even lifestyle-related disease. But why? Well, contrary to popular belief, the fact that a food is considered processed doesn't make it unhealthy. What we see in the studies is that people who consume more processed foods do 2 things. 1, they overconsume calories more than those who eat single ingredient foods, and they tend to underconsume important micronutrients and fiber. Alongside the fact that ultra-processed foods tend to be very tasty, that makes them easy to overconsume. And because they taste so good and are usually easy to prepare and consume, they are more addictive. If you have the choice between cooking for 30 minutes for a superbly nutritious meal that tastes alright, versus a much cheaper, faster meal option that tastes even better, then most people would go for the second option. If you're poor, then you choose the ultra-processed version because it's cheap. The same goes if you're short on time or if you just want something really tasty. On the opposite side, our society is less focused around physical movement. As I said, most people work sedentary jobs, so there's very little incentive to move around for most of your day. And the same goes for going to the gym or going on a jog, a hike, or anything like that. But the big paradox here is that the worse your physical capacity gets, the less you want to move around as well, creating a vicious cycle that causes you to continuously make worse lifestyle decisions. Suddenly, going on hikes or playing a sport becomes a drag because you know you're gonna be worse at it. The threshold for starting a new activity becomes thicker and thicker, which is why people who know they're out of shape are unlikely to join a gym. And that's why I think it's especially important to encourage these people, because it's much more comfortable for somebody who's been active all their life to start a new fitness project than it is for somebody who has never done it. So, we know that calorie-dense foods with poor micronutrient contents are more accessible, we know people move less, but is that really all there is? Is that why 1 out of 8 people today have severe obesity? Why 1 out of 10 have diabetes? Why Ozempic is the most trending drug in the world? Well, no, there's more to that. Our world is so dependent on dopamine and feeling good all the time that the difficult things in life feel more difficult now than ever, which is part of why we have so much anxiety, depression, and even body dysmorphia. The food industry contributes a lot, but so does social media, TV, entertainment. Our social lives all revolve around dopamine, and food is often connected. If you go out with your friends, you're either likely consuming alcohol or going out to eat. If you're watching TV or scrolling through TikTok, you can end up snacking mindlessly. If you're at the cinema, you snack. If you're on vacation, you eat like you wouldn't believe. We also have research that most people vastly underestimate how much food they consume. And the bigger they are, the more they seem to underreport. Many are simply eating because they're bored, and if you eat alongside another source of dopamine, you're not going to become as satiated. On top of this, doctors and most other health professionals don't learn a lot about nutrition or lifestyle as a part of their education. So when many problems are caused by it, they often don't know how to combat it, or they don't have the time or resources to help. I even had a family member who wanted to lose weight, and the doctor put him on a starvation diet with 1200 calories and 30 grams of protein per day, and just gave out some hunger depressive drug to combat the issue instead of actually providing solid advice and follow-up. But it's not as simple as that either. We do have hundreds of studies on different interventions to reduce obesity in patients, and most of them work short-term, meaning that many lose weight on different strategies, different diet models, different medication. But after a while, most regain their weight, not because of some underlying hormonal issue or some abstract idea like that, but because they were unable to stick with it long term. Here's one thing that most people don't realize at all. Weight gain for the majority of people is very slow. It's almost unnoticeable. If you're on an average calorie surplus of say 50 per day, that's like half an apple or 10 grams of potato chips. But if that's your average, you will slowly be gaining weight. A few pounds or kilos per year at most, yes. But after 10 years, that might be 20 kilos. After 20 years, that's 40 kilos, assuming you kept eating in a small surplus. Which is very realistic, as the more you eat, the more you drive higher hunger signaling. And instead of making small changes that people can stick to, which would ultimately combat the weight gain, they try doing it all at once. Instead of swapping your soda for water or diet soda, or reducing your snack frequency from 5 times per week to 3 times per week, they try to opt for a diet model which is often fairly different from their normal eating habits and is often lacking in certain nutrients. Or even worse, they hop on some trend they saw on social media instead of taking a look at their own diet and figuring small things out. Like, okay, what am I overconsuming? I tend to eat McDonald's once per week, but I don't want to cut it out. Maybe I could opt for a lower calorie option, or perhaps a more filling option. Maybe I can cook with less oil or reduce my weekly candy content by just 20%. Or even just walk 1,000 more steps per day. Stuff like this is where you should really start, because if you start small, then you're more likely to stick to that approach long term than if you just hopped on a trend or new diet model or exercise regime which you've never been able to stick to. Like if you've never been to the gym, try going once per week, or even better, do an activity outside or with somebody else. After a while, that becomes your norm, and you might be able to push it to 2 days per week. Now, it would be a lot easier if whole foods were the cheapest food, or if daily exercise exercise was a part of work or if you didn't have to make these decisions. But I genuinely think people should be able to choose what they want, but that they should still choose the healthiest option because they realize the value in being in good shape. As I said in the start of the video, modern medicine and pharmaceuticals, they're awesome. They help us live longer, and some can actually help combat obesity. But if you're unable to move or do the things you like, then that's not living. That is just existing with medical assistance. So why do we have an obesity epidemic? It's a combination of factors, just like everything else. People are less physically active, more centered on their careers and dopamine instead of their health. We have worse sleep habits, which drive up production of the hunger hormone ghrelin while reducing the satiety hormone leptin. Foods high in calories and low in micronutrients are the norm. Foods that aren't as filling, but rather addictive. People tend to look for easy solutions rather than fixing small things to make it sustainable. And misinformation about nutrition is also readily available to mislead anyone who genuinely wants to become healthier. Health professionals don't often have the resources to help and follow these people up, so they also opt for medical solutions, even though that means that the person has to stay on them forever. But one thing many seem to have forgotten is that you have a choice. You have the choice to make better decisions. You have a choice to avoid a lot of these things. Sure, it's not always easy. It's certainly much harder for some people to lose weight, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't have these societal struggles. Though one thing is for sure, every person who struggles with their weight needs an individualized plan, because everyone has different eating and exercise habits. People have different stress levels, workload, family situations, etc. But obesity and associated diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and many different forms of cancer are something we can actually combat if we do it right. Also, in my own online clinic, the clients who succeed don't starve themselves or follow cookie-cutter plans, but instead they progress by building on habits that they can actually live with, while following them up so that they don't fall off. The good news is that obesity is very treatable and can be overcome. But do you think society as a whole is doing anything right to combat it? Or are we perhaps too focused on the details and missing the bigger picture, where it's more of a series of choices being made for a long time? Let me know down below in the comments what you guys think, and if you've lost a lot of weight yourself, feel free to share how you did it and what tips you would give to somebody trying to do the same. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.